The gap between idea and prototype has shrunk to pretty much nothing.
And things that would have taken, a 1-year research cycle, many training runs, and a difficult machine learning engineering task can now genuinely be done in a couple of hours with a prompt and a for loop.
The capability of conversational intelligence platforms are great, but I just think that the term sometimes for those that are not in the know might not explain what it is. Yeah.
And we believe that within that data, there's a rich vein of insight for customers are telling you what's annoying them.
The contact center is kind of in a position that it now has the insight, but doesn't necessarily have the responsibility for fixing the issue.
This has to be an organisational priority.
This conversation is with Shane Lynn from EdgeTier. He's the CEO of EdgeTier. EdgeTier is a conversational intelligence platform that helps contact centres utilise the vast amounts of data that you generate every single day in the form of conversations. You can look at things like resolution rate, you can look at predicted or not predicted, but modelled CSAT. You can use it to mine things like why are customers churning and what patterns exist in conversations that we can do something about to improve the business. The idea of this conversation is to turn contact centers from a reactive part of the business to a proactive part of the business, and one that rather than absorbs the demand that's generated from failures in other parts of the business, instead contributes strategically to helping improve the business on a continuous basis, because the contact center is a place where issues come in, and you can leverage those insights to then go back into the business to make improvements to products, services, policies, and all that kind of stuff. So this is a great conversation about how you can leverage data to do that, turn the contact center into a strategic asset, and also how you can leverage that same technology, conversational insight technology, to look at your AI agent conversations as well. We talk a little bit towards the back end about what makes a good conversation, what makes a good experience, and how you can leverage this technology to get those insights, make improvements, and do things that you could only wish of doing today. Stuff that takes teams 4 weeks today is now entirely feasible in a few minutes with the right technology. So this is a really interesting conversation. I'm sure you're going to get a lot from it with Shane Lynn of EdgeTier. Thanks for joining me. Appreciate it. Maybe we could start with hearing a little bit about yourself, a bit about EdgeTier, and what kind of your role and EdgeTier's role is in the AI sort of space.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So Shane Lynn is my name. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of EdgeTier. And we're effectively an analytics platform that sits on top of customer service and contact center data and helps people improve their customer satisfaction and their agent performance. So our backgrounds, we're technical co-founders, nerds from back in the day who did PhDs in machine learning and statistics and all that type of good stuff. And we've been blessed now with, the advent and the continued progression of AI over the years. We've been working in this space for coming up on 10 years. And really when we entered this space, we just saw, a world of tons of data, lots of pressure to use that data to build reports and improve businesses, and an inability to do so just through a lack of tooling and a lack of how accessible that data was. It all seemed to be just trapped. So we've set out kind of on a mission to build products that make that easier. And our dream is that, the contact center should be intelligent enough to tell you what's wrong. It should be easy enough for you to get the answer as soon as someone asks you a question. And we believe the more people ask questions of their data and the faster those answers come back, the more intelligent decisions they will make to improve their businesses and their overall customer outcomes. So that's probably the core of our whole system. And my role here, I'm CEO. Traditionally, an engineer by trade. I suppose I did computer engineering, was involved very much in the early days in building the product, in the machine learning part of it. And as we've grown now, my job has become more commercial. It's been a fascinating journey personally. I think moving from a very technical role into more of a managerial and leadership position, and learning, instead of building the product, building the team that builds the product. So now I kind of cover customer success, a little bit in product direction, and then obviously funding and finance and HR and all the other good CEO stuff.
Nice. And so would you say then, because we've had conversations about conversational intelligence over the years, we've had companies like Symbol AI on the podcast and companies like that. Recently, I think last year we had Here AI, which I suppose is probably more like a new school conversational intelligence platform. It seems to me that inevitably generative AI has had a massive impact on the conversational intelligence space, because what used to be very kind of like still AI, still machine learning models. But if I think about your likes of Symbol AI and the platforms like that in the past, where you have to transcribe the data and then you're using traditional machine learning to do things like topic analysis and sentiment analysis and things like that. What's changed given now we have large language models? Has that made things easier or harder? I think it might have made things easier on a product standpoint, but maybe harder on a business differentiation perspective. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but has it made it easier or harder?
Good question. Overall, I think it's made it easier, but it's definitely, and it has raised the expectation of the market too. The fact now that you can extract insights from text using plain English to do that has allowed much more accessible use of machine learning across all professionals. So I think large language models, there's been an explosion in capability, and I suppose the ability of machines to understand written and transcribed text has just exponentially grown. And things that would have taken, a 1-year research cycle, many training runs, and a difficult machine learning engineering task can now genuinely be done in a couple of hours with a prompt and a for loop. That's all quite simple. It's more expensive to run that way, but it works. But I think what's happened then is the stuff that still remains hard is the stuff at the frontier of that. So making sure that those prompts are acting in a very stable and predictable way, making sure that you're extracting the right features. You still have to store it correctly. You still have to do it at a very high scale. And you still have to do it in a way that the user or the end consumer of that data can make sense of it all. And I still think that issue of building a product that delivers value to that end user is still a challenging task. And actually, I kind of feel that large language models have definitely democratized access to this capability. But I think people dramatically underestimate the challenge of going from proof of concept on an Excel file in your local machine to a system that every organization can rely on, is updated in real time, and you have a UI that people can actually extract the insights that they need.
That's very true. I think that the gap between idea and prototype has shrunk to pretty much nothing. But the gap from prototype to production has probably grown tremendously.
Yeah, and I'm open to that changing again. I think there's a big disruption in software engineering practices. I think there's a lot of talk about big disruption in software engineering practices, and some companies are at the edge there and seeing gains. But I still think people have overestimated the impact of that in the short term. I think there's still a lot of work to do before every organization can build their own platform using a couple of prompts. There's a big gap there. Like you say, you get something working, and then 2 days later someone's coming for you asking for a change, and unless you're still a data engineer or a programmer, there's still quite a lot of challenge to get that from we worked on this subset of data that we extracted from Zendesk last week to now that's happening every day. And now it's I want to do analysis over a 2-year period. I want to have this automatically labeled, extract these insights and the feeling from customer conversations at an emotional level reliably. Every time you ask the question of one of those systems, it'll be different. So getting that consistent and getting that working at scale is still a challenge.
Yeah. And what would an example be for somebody listening to this that hears the term conversational intelligence, thinks it sounds fancy, but doesn't really understand what that means? What would be an example practically of something that a customer would use EdgeTier for? What insights will they get? And then what can they do about that insight to improve their business?
Well, it is fancy, right? Yeah. My marketing team would like me to say it's fancy.
And the reality is that the capability of conversational intelligence platforms are great. But I just think that the term sometimes for those that are not in the know might not explain what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think all of these terms have become just a blur of terms bracketed under AI. And I think conversational intelligence is often mixed up with a chatbot or a deflection type functionality where, a system is having an intelligent conversation with a customer in order to reduce overall contact volume. That's not our game. We're more in extracting intelligence from the conversations. So the phrase conversational intelligence to me is using the insights that are happening within customer conversations to improve your business. Now, I think that term does get used in lots of other places as well. By way of example, I suppose, I think, and maybe I'll go at a higher level, I think everyone wants to improve their customer experience. I think that's just like you talk to anyone in the customer service world, customer experience is a priority, or it is supposedly. I think there's some surveys out there that say that 85% of executives will say that improving customer experience is a top or a significant priority. That's like a thing. But then at the same time, if you look at board packs across 100 companies, I can guarantee you that customer experience isn't a slide in 85% of them. So it's not there. And I suppose it's an interesting question because people give it lip service, but it doesn't really make the headlines within organizations. Even though everyone knows that customer retention is important, customer experience is important, it's a lot cheaper to retain a customer than it is to gain a new one. And in our world, we believe fundamentally that if you're running a high volume contact center with a lot of customer conversations happening, that's a complex environment with lots of different languages, lots of different agents, lots of different markets potentially, and a lot of data coming through your systems. And we believe that within that data, there's a rich vein of insight where customers are telling you what's annoying them, they're telling you where the frictions are, and they're telling you what you need to fix. What we do is, and the kind of insights we do is we read all of that data in real time. So you can imagine us sitting on top of the call and chat systems, ingesting all of that data in real time, so there's nothing changed, and then processing all of that into a nicely neat stored format and looking at every utterance from every customer and every agent and analyzing it from a different angle. So looking at is the customer happy here? Are they frustrated here? Are they confused here? Has the agent expressed empathy? Has the agent addressed the customer's query? Is the customer's query solved? Pulling all that data together into a single platform that then can be queried and analyzed or automatically analyzed to pull out those insights. So as a by way of very simple example, you can ask questions like, what's the most frustrating element of our customer contact for the last week and what should I do about it? That's a very quick and easy thing that I believe you should be able to get the answer to within 2 or 3 minutes. Whereas in reality in contact centers, that's potentially a 2 or 3 day turnaround with a couple of analysts reading through conversations, working out what frustration means, looking through different languages, translating them in Google search, maybe copying and pasting them to Excel files, making pivot tables. Whereas I believe you should be able to answer that question straight away. And even more ideally, the answer to that question should come to you proactively from your system. So we have a couple of good case studies there where, very high volume contact centers have discovered issues that drive frustration within their customer base that once they fix them have dramatically removed that contact and cost from their contact center. So that driving of continuous improvement is really where we focus.
Yeah, that's good. So you mentioned there that you were looking at conversations to understand, did the agent resolve it? Is that one of the levels of insights you can get from that then? Because most of my experience of conversational intelligence platforms has been to do stuff like what you suggested there. What's going wrong in conversations? What's working well from sales conversations, and which agents are able to upsell the most and things like that. But I never thought about using the same platform to do some of the crucial kind of fundamental numbers that contact centers need, which is what's our resolution rate, what's our average handle time, what's our customer satisfaction, those kind of high level stuff. When you said resolution, are you getting at the fact that EdgeTier can do that level of analysis as well as the granular level, or no?
Yeah. So we speak to a lot of customers, and our roadmap and what we do with the data is often informed through those conversations. And one of the ones that's most common is, director of customer operations is under pressure to improve either customer satisfaction or efficiency in the contact center. And they're looking at what's driving customers crazy. And they have these surveys that go out after conversations, and they're looking at, their CSAT score, their NPS score that comes after conversations. And was your issue resolved, true or false? And they're at the mercy there of response rates, which are typically kind of 10 to 15%. So they have a small number of surveys to work on. And often those surveys, then the people who reply to the surveys are the people who are the most pissed off. They're not getting a full view of the entire contact center operation. So we've done a lot of work really in assessing conversations with the entire context in place. And this is made realistic through the advent of large language models. But you can look at an entire conversation, read every message in it, read how the agent interacted with the customer, and make a best guess for, was the customer's issue resolved in this transaction? And you can then, if you imagine applying that across every interaction that happens, you get a really good view of a true false percentage resolution rate across every contact reason, which we're also labeling automatically based on the context, across every agent, across every market, across every customer type. And you can use that data to slice and dice and immediately say, okay, where's our resolution failing the most? Is that a particular agent or team or BPO that it's lower for? Is that a particular contact reason that we're seeing low down? And then when you've got that, you can pull out, and where specifically in those conversations did the customer exhibit elements of frustration, where they said oh, you've already said that, or, oh, I already checked this in the thing, or, oh, your terms and conditions aren't correct. And you can quickly go from, all right, our cancellation contact reason has the lowest resolution rate. Within the cancellation reasons, we see frustration when people are talking about refund policies. And then you dig down and get the system to read 100 of those conversations and say, well, in these conversations, 70% of people are talking about the terms and conditions on your mobile app. You should fix those. So you can go from, I suppose, a large chunk of data that you used to have to read manually to signals that are labeled across every interaction to directly to insights. And I think that ability gives the contact center individuals a voice at the table outside the contact center, because these issues don't originate in the contact center, but they're tasked with solving them. And I think that's the disconnect that we need to fix in the industry, where the contact center becomes a voice in the rest of the organization and can quantifiably say where the problems are.
I always find, though, contact centers have a really raw deal because, as you said, the issue starts elsewhere, causes a problem for the customer that has to then get in contact with the business, and they contact a part of the business that's not responsible for the issue and didn't cause the issue. But that part of the business gets all the insight. So they get verbatim from the customer their exact situation, exactly what went wrong, exactly how they're feeling, and they need to resolve it. But in those conversations that were previously just going from the mouth of the customer to the head of an individual agent, now that you're able to understand that on aggregate across all conversations and take that data out of the heads of the agents to a place where you can actually assess it and act on it, the contact center is kind of in a position that it now has the insight, but doesn't necessarily have the responsibility for fixing the issue. Like the refund process you mentioned there, the contact center might not necessarily be able to do anything about the refund policy, yet maybe the refund policy has a real fundamental problem that loads of customers are complaining about. So what do you see in terms of your customers? The contact centers that get it right and are able to use those insights to then impact the other parts of the business in a positive way, what kind of things did they get right in being able to influence and get things done in areas that are outside of their direct responsibility?
Yeah. And I think this has to be an organizational priority. In the most successful customers we have, it's not seen as, the contact center team are over here doing their thing and we're over here in tech or product or marketing doing our thing. There's more of a holistic view of there's a customer orientation to the whole organization, and together we need to fix these problems. And that's a new way of thinking, I suppose, because like you say, the contact center is solve the customer problems and get rid of them. And I think the change that we're trying to drive, or that we see in our most successful customers, is the contact center can both solve these problems, but also help us prioritize where we should spend our time on fixing issues. So it's a real shift from, and the best people at this are moving from, you've heard the term, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? you can't have a contact center that's just reacting to the noisiest customer. You might get like a high value customer that comes in on a Monday morning and tells you, my account's blocked, I can't get into it, my app is broken. And you could think you're doing a really good job by setting up an action group, fixing that problem, and ultimately find out, you bring it to IT, you solve the problem, that high value customer is saved. And you find out that the bug was, a problem with iOS on the iPhone 10, and it affects, 1% of customers or less. And that anecdotal, reactive, emotional way of running things leads to a distrust of the contact center, because the IT team is pulled into your storm on the day and does fix the problem, but it's not capturing the trends or capturing what you see across all interactions, and actually spotting something that frustrates 30% of customers, but they may not be squeaking quite as much, is a much better use of IT team time, marketing team time, and the rest of the organization. So the customers that do this best typically have the idea of a continuous improvement team that leverages data within the contact center to prioritize what tasks and elements they should do. And that's how they get a seat at the board table. They don't come with the anecdote of Jane, our high value customer, complained on Monday. They come with revenue and growth impacting numbers that aren't anecdotal. Very clear prioritization of this is what we should fix now. And that will drive 100K in cost reduction from the contact center. So really quantifying that, but that's not the case at the moment.
Yeah. And it got me thinking there, earlier you were saying about kind of like contact centers solve the customer problem and get rid of them. Part of the, I suppose, responsibility of the contact center is to be concerned with loyalty. And, if a customer calls and they're in a bad mood, they've had a bad experience, you need to get them back on side and do the right thing and help them issue, because you don't want them to leave disgruntled, because every time they contact you, if they leave disgruntled, it's only a matter of time before they're not a customer anymore. So it kind of got me thinking there a little bit about, the value of the value of conversational data for me is that it is so rich in context that you don't get that from CRM data, for example. CRM data, there's structured fields, there's a limited number of items that could be in that field based on predetermined select lists and stuff like that. So you can get something from that data, but I don't feel it's as rich as conversational data. So I wonder whether, and I don't know if this is something you've looked at, and if not, maybe it's something you could comment on in terms of its feasibility. Let's say that you take, I don't know, your last X number of churned customers. Would it be feasible to take the X number of churned customers and then have a look at their last 1, 2, 3 conversations that they had with the business, and then figure out, has something happened in those conversations that are outside the norm compared to a normal conversation, and therefore might be an indicator of potential likelihood to churn if we see that again?
Yeah, that's a really, that's kind of a classic case now. What you're doing there is you're stepping into the shoes of, a customer operations director or a chief customer officer. And this is the world that we want to enable, where a hypothesis like that doesn't turn into a 3-week project. And that's exactly what our system does. You can go in, pick out those customers and quickly see what have been, well, first of all, have they appeared in our contact center data? And often they will have if they've had a grievance. But how many times have they contacted? What channels did they use? What contact reasons have we labeled within the contact center data about what they've been talking about? How much frustration have they shown? Pull all of that into a kind of a single view, and then ask questions of it. What's been the main pattern of this, and how is it different from normal contact? And getting the answer to that will lead you to more questions. But if the first question you've asked there takes 2 weeks to get an answer to, you won't ask a next question. And that's exactly the kind of use case that we enable, where it's, you come with a hypothesis, you have access to all that data, you can get the answer to it quite quickly, and then you'll ask further questions and go deeper to come to the answer. So it's a really typical use case for the EdgeTier platform. And what I like then is actually to go further is not just you as a customer operations director doing that, but that data and that capability being available to people in product, people in marketing, people in regulation, people in security, the customer, obviously agents themselves, team leads, everyone should be able to get to that answer. The reality right now is if you ask that question in most contact centers, if they're lucky, there's a set of data analysts that have a queue of about 4 weeks to get to the next ticket, and you won't get your answer until next quarter, at which point you'll have forgotten because there'll be 5 other fires. So the speed of that analysis is really the kind of end goal for us.
And then it's the next step, isn't it? Because once you've got that and you find that there is a signal that is indicative of potential churn, you then want to be able to pick up on that signal in future to then mediate that instead.
But both in future and also if there's something ready. So you need to be able to set up alerts. So it's another whole area for us in terms of alerting people as things emerge, both things you don't expect and things you do expect. So alerting on customer contact patterns or contact reasons or utterances within conversations. And then also more fundamentally, if you spot a pattern there, which is what often happens, clearly articulating the impact of that problem and the size of it to the rest of the organization becomes your role. Like you have to go to the rest. If you want to get action from IT, and it comes back to your point earlier that the contact center probably can't solve the problem, but they can quantify and articulate to the organization how important that problem is to fix. And that's the only way that the contact center team gets IT time, gets roadmap space, gets prioritized. They can't have an anecdote where it's like, I spotted Kane last week. He was a good customer and he contacted 5 times and it was all about our change of address and he couldn't do it due to a regulatory thing we have. And he left. And I think it's a problem with churn. That's a really different story to, I've done an analysis. In the last 3 months, we've had 45 customers who are all worth 45K in annual revenue. And they've all left with the same pattern of change of addresses. Here's the data in a dump. Here's all the conversations. We need to fix this now. That's how you get action at board level. That's how you get action from other departments because they all share in the win and you report, it's a flywheel. You make sure that you report that win to the organization. And it's like, look what the contact center found. Look at our revenue metrics changing. It has to come to that. And look how IT also won this with us. And then you're bringing the organization with you. You're not the squeaky, those contact center guys are always complaining about customer. You're driving change. And that's a mindset shift across the organization that the contact center has a voice here and it's important.
That's really good. I like that. I like that how that fosters a culture of continuous improvement and collaboration and centering around the customer, isn't it? Like nothing else matters other than solving problems for customers and everyone needs to get together and rally together and do the right thing for it, Yeah,
and but it is a big hard move from that anecdotal stuff. That's the main thing. Like you get someone who, the last customer you spoke to is the most important thing. Like I fall for it here in our organization. Like we have a lot of clients and, I do a roadmap presentation to someone and the things they tell me about, it's really hard not to be in the next meeting thinking, I just heard about this thing because it's anecdotal and it's that one customer, but it's not getting out of that into like, okay, well, have I seen that across 20 customers or just that one?
Yeah.
To make sure the organization is working on the right problems.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people listening to this who have experience in building AI agents and chatbots will appreciate that because it's the same sort of thing. Like you look at chatbot transcripts and agent transcripts and it's very tempting to see one thing in isolation and think, oh shit, we need to fix that. And part of the issue is that, teams will end up rallying to themselves together to try and go and fix things that might happen 1 in every 100 conversations and miss the thing that happens 1 in every 10,
Big time. And it's a huge, the chatbot space now is a big growth area for us. And we're seeing a lot of interest in, I suppose, people are deploying more chatbot systems. They're seeing initial success with FAQ bots and getting answers to things. And then it becomes we need to drive more deflection. And now that's the KPI. And again, they're back to, let's download 100 conversations, read them all, put them in an Excel sheet, fight with them. And it's been a big use case for us to, read in those chatbot conversations. They actually require more monitoring and more labeling because there's no human in the loop at all. And then extracting the insights from those. What has the highest escalation rate? Where are customers in these chatbot conversations exhibiting frustration or getting stuck in the loop? Where is the chatbot repeating itself? Where can we next invest in the escalated conversations in the chatbot to further our deflection rate? So it's the same the same data with a different lens.
Yeah, that's very good, because I think that's what's missing in part really, is that, you know, for years it was all about you have to manually tag the parts in the conversation that you care about in order to report on them. So if somebody reaches this part in the conversation, then we know that their issue is being resolved, because they can't get to this point without a successful API return, and therefore they've got to get here if it's been successful. And so you would tag that, and then after the conversation's happened, you would export the data, and then you can say, okay, show me of all conversations how many hit that node, which means it was resolved, etc. And that's
harder in the LLM world.
Well, it was a massive task in the NLU world, and nobody hardly did it because it's just too much of a big task. In an LLM world, it's even harder because you don't have the concept of nodes. Everything's happening in various different prompts and even sub-agents and stuff like that are, you know, passing contact between each other and stuff. So it gets very challenging. So ultimately, you are then down to the transcript level, because that's ultimately the source of truth at the end of the day. What's actually happened is present in the transcript from an experience point of view. So
we look at this a lot, and the other I suppose ancillary metric we've added there is the idea of an experience score, like an automatically calculated CSAT or NPS proxy, because you only get that from 10%, like I said earlier on. Whereas we have the idea of, okay, we can aggregate here. One, we have our metric now of like, was this customer's issue resolved? Did they finish with like a thank you? Were they grateful at the end? Or did they finish kind of frustrated and kind of hang up, or like end the chat or end the call? And all together bring together an estimate of what would this customer score this interaction. And that's another signal people can use then to dig through the data and say, okay, where are my lowest experience score chatbot interactions where the customer is clearly not resolved and frustrated? And how do I improve those conversations then across the band? So
and what things?
Same data.
Yeah, that's good. That. So what things do you consider when calculating that experience score?
So it's a machine learning model. That actually isn't we don't use a large language model for that, because it's we want it to be pretty exact. There's a range of features that go into it. Some of our large language model extracted, and some of them are old school, more old school machine learning model, because we're running them at such scale that's just more cost effective. A range of emotion detection. So we did find that we didn't use any out of the box emotion detection models, because often they were trained on, you know, movie reviews or online reviews, whereas actually customer service is quite different. And then we found that within customer service, individual industries then also have nuances to what frustration and what confusion looks like. And actually within that, each language also has different variances. So we have like language and industry specific models to detect emotions within contact center conversations. And we aggregate those emotions together and where they happen in the conversation. So, you know, you could start very frustrated, but if you end with kind of gratitude or praise, that's probably still quite a good experience score overall from the customer perspective. Whereas, you know, if you end frustrated, that's usually a sign that the NPS will be quite low. So the place in the conversation. And then we take in the standard metrics as well. So things like how long the conversation was, the amount of time between responses. There's a range of things that go into a machine learning model and that spits out a score.
Cool. That's good. That's interesting. Yeah, because I think that's quite hard to pin down sometimes in terms of the quality of the experience. It's something that we've been thinking a lot about, and we've had quite a lot of questions about, in terms of like, with an AI agent, what constitutes quality? Because we used to think of things like, you know, turn count is a factor. The longer the conversation goes on, you could make the assumption that the worse it is, because it might assume that someone's not being heard. Whereas actually, now that language models can uphold a conversation a lot better, a longer conversation might in some cases be an indicator of a good conversation. And then equally, we used to have things like in the NLU world, how often is a fallback triggered? So how often are you engaging in grounding the conversation because it's going off track or it's drifting into areas where you can't handle? And the more that happens, the worse the conversation is. But actually, again, you could consider grounding as a form of disambiguation. So it's just the quest and searching for understanding. So it might not negatively impact the conversation as long as you arrive at a place of understanding. So I'm just curious about how you think about the intricacies of a conversation and what makes a good one.
So I think there's actually even further nuance. So we can use labeled conversations, both internal labels that we've built to build up a kind of bank, and also, where we have CSAT and NPS scores to build a proxy model. We do have internal debates, and we're expanding this at the moment around, I'll give you an example, right? So, imagine, and we've seen this, imagine for an airline, the customer gets in touch to find an item of valuable lost property they left on the flight. You've done it. You've walked off a flight, your Bose noise cancelling headphones are left on the seat. You ring up the next day, we're recording the call, get through to the agent. Look, I left my headphones on the seat. They're, really valuable to me. I want them back. And the agent goes, yeah, great. I'm going to check that out for you. Puts that on hold for a minute, goes and talks to the local airport, lost and found. Didn't find the headphones. Sorry, no luck. Goes back to the customer, gives them the bad news. Customer's kind of disappointed. Says, I'll call back next week and try again. Like, what's the experience score there? And does the agent mark this as a resolved or unresolved conversation? Because from the customer service agent, they've done everything within their power and followed policy. They've done a good job. From the customer's perspective, they haven't got what they wanted, although they did get an answer. And really, they're still leaving disappointed and sad. So within the how was the experience, you have to look at what's driving emotions here. Is it the people side, which is something you can fix and is in the control of the contact center? Has the agent, treated this customer badly? That's an obvious one to fix and shouldn't happen. Or have the policies caused a problem? So in this case, this particular case, the policies didn't cause any problem, just the circumstance has been bad. But often it could be a policy problem where the agent does a great job at explaining a policy that the customer just doesn't like, which happens often in baggage inquiries and stuff in airlines. That's a bad experience for the customer, but that's just the experience, So I do find that there's a lot of work at the moment we're doing on separating out, is this a people issue? Is this a process issue? Or is this a product issue? The 3 Ps, where you need to split out the product is driving the dissatisfaction here. Our baggage policy is just awkward. Or this is a people problem. This agent did very well or did poorly at handling this interaction, and that's causing a problem, or up or down, a problem or a solution. Or it's the process itself where they go through. So that nuance within experience and emotions is the next frontier there, I think.
That's wicked. I love that idea, because for me, I think that on the process or policy side, you see that quite regularly, which is that, and that's why I think CSAT is not a great metric, and containment isn't either, because essentially in your case there, which is a great example of someone's left the headphones on the plane, they call back, they try and get the issue resolved, they can't get it resolved, but the agent's done all they can, and maybe the customer's not happy with the situation, the fact that they've lost their headphones, but maybe they are quite content with the interaction they've just had. Because the agent handled it really well, they did all they can, the customer knows that the agent's done all they can, and they know that the situation is one that is just a bit of an unfortunate one. Whereas if it was that, our lost property policy states that you must wait 30 days in order to call back about it or whatever, then if that's the policy, technically speaking, that's kind of partially resolved, if you like, but it's a terrible experience. The agent's
done what they can.
Yeah,
but
it's still a bad experience. On the other side, there's a bit of an ambiguous situation that doesn't have a resolve, but the customer's fairly happy. So it's quite challenging to pin down in that respect.
And then it does come into what's within the locus of control then of the contact center. So obviously, I think a lot of QA solutions, and we do QA on top of our conversations as well. So because we're ingesting all of those conversations, we're obviously pulled into a QA conversation, right? So where you can rate the things, or use an automatic LLM to rate conversations, whether they were good or bad. And this type of thing comes in a lot there, where it's, is this a people or process issue? And often QA evaluations is about, has the agent followed the process? And that's just a process thing, but it's not necessarily saying the process is bad or good. It's just the agent gets full marks if they follow the process. Or did the agent more softer tone of voice? Were they nice to the customer? And the nice to the customer thing is really in control of the contact center. Obviously, if you have a load of signals saying that your agents aren't nice, that's a contact center problem. But if you have a load of signals saying that the process drives customer frustration, and your job is to improve customer satisfaction, you have to bring that outside the contact center. It's not in your locus of control to change the processes or change the policies. You have to drive that across the organization. And that's a more challenging task that I think you have to use data for.
Yeah.
Where we end up. But
Indeed.
being able to do that automatically is where the magic is. So being able to isolate these pockets of reasons for problems and kind of without reading 10,000 chat transcripts and having a team of analysts digging through, that's where we want to get to.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Shane, I really appreciate your time, my friend. I want to be respectful of time because I know that we're kind of on the hour, but really appreciate it. What's one thing that you wish people either knew or would do with EdgeTier that perhaps they don't today?
That's a good question. I think the message I would put out there is that this stuff is easier to get live. So one of the things we fight against is, wow, I couldn't take that on now because it's like a 6-month project to get live. And we've seen that with other larger enterprise solutions, but we've worked incredibly hard to build the integrations that go live in a matter of days. And we could have your data with labels looking good within 3 or 4 days. And you could be logged in answering these questions and getting promotions. So I think this data is, if you get the right product, this is easier than it sounds. And there's a really rich set of insights there. And once you see your team start to use it, it's that feedback loop. They get the initial reward from getting stuck into the data, getting an answer, quantifying it, saving time. And then we just see more and more usage across the organization. So making that change isn't as hard as it sounds. And there's actually zero IT effort because the APIs for, Zendesk, Salesforce, Intercom, Genesis are all there. And we just plug in and go. So I would say you need to give it a go to see it work. And there's a very bright future, I think, in this world of LLMs and agents working on this behind the scenes. Brilliant.
I totally agree. EdgeTier.com if people want to go and check it out. EdgeTier.com. And there we go. We'll maybe put your LinkedIn on there as well, Shane, if you're happy with that.
Great. Thanks so much for today. Great to chat.
Appreciate it. Nice one. Thanks very much. And see you all soon. Cheers. Bye now.